Okay, so in this video, we will talk about the process of wireframing and prototyping. And a question that people usually ask, like, what the hell is even wireframing, or what is prototyping? So let me first start with what is the goal of wireframing or prototyping. And basically the goal, the end result that you always want when working with designers, and where this idea of wireframing and prototyping comes into, is that you want to end up with a final design of what we call a clickable prototype. So the end result is always something that looks as if it was a real app, but in the end, it's just pictures to visualize to engineers. This is how it's going to look like. And it's usually in a software, like what people use is called Figma, or they use InVision. So the engineers can actually go and look, okay, this is going to be 100 pixels wide. Okay, this is actually the color code that I need to use. So there's no ambiguity around how the design is supposed to look like. So that's the end product. But how you get there starts somewhere else. So we can start with the idea of wireframing. So here you see like an example of what a wireframe is. It's the second from the left. And what you can see is it's very simple. At this point, whatever the outcome doesn't look yet like the actual product. And the goal of a wireframe is not necessarily to define how each and every part, how each and every screen interaction and feature in the product is going to work. It's more like a storytelling tool to put a structure and a face to your ideas and show how a problem would be solved. Because we say like a picture says 1,000 words, and sometimes it's just much more easy to communicate your idea in the form of like not necessarily a drawing, but like a simple wireframe. And when talking to engineers, it helps when talking to engineers, but much more importantly, it helps when talking to your designers, because usually you're collaborating with designers on something visual. So if you want to communicate an idea to them, like I imagine the feature working like this, on the one hand, it's very hard to communicate just with words. So much better is to communicate with a wireframe. But you don't want to spend like hours of time designing it how exactly you want it to look like. As a product manager, that's not your role, that's the designer's role. So using a wireframe basically allows you to put some sort of structures like, okay, I want a button here, I want a picture here, I want this here, that here. Tools to use that, on the one hand, you could just use a piece of paper. That's what I visualized on the left-hand side, which is what we usually call a sketch. Like you can literally just draw it out. A wireframe is then when you digitize it. Like you can use PowerPoint for it. You can use any sort of tool, whiteboarding tool. We mentioned Miro before. You can use any tool to then basically digitize your sketch. And the reason you want to do it is because it allows you to make changes much more easily in digital form. But that's still not really showing what the final product is supposed to look like. So what would then happen after the wireframe is the product designer starts tackling it. And also just an important note, wireframes is not necessarily always a part of the job description of product managers. Like I, for myself, I don't usually create wireframes because our product design team is very heavily involved in the early stages of the product development lifecycle. So by the time we are communicating around wireframes, the product designer is usually already on board. And they are the ones creating the wireframes, and we collaborate on that. But of course, I can still make suggestions, and then I propose suggestions also often in the form of a wireframe. And what the product designer then does, they take the wireframe and they will translate it into what is called a mock-up. So mock-up is not the final design outcome, because in order to finish the finalized design, like there's a lot of polishing work. There's just very minuscule work to make sure all the alignments are done, all the font sizes are correct. That usually takes a lot of time to make it pixel perfect. So before doing that, they create what is called the mock-up. So it's still already, as you can see also in this visualization here, it already mostly looks like the finished product. It might just not be super polished, but it's good enough to get feedback from your stakeholders on. It's good enough to do custom interviews with it, like say, okay, this is what it looks like. What do you think about this? And then you start collecting the feedback until you take this feedback, and then the designer creates the final prototype. The prototype is then literally what is ready to be starting the development on. So then you don't need to, you're not supposed to make any changes anymore. We call that what is like frozen. The design is frozen, is ready. You don't make changes anymore, because every time the designer makes changes after the engineer already started working on it, you're generating wasted time for everyone. And then basically what it means is whenever you or the product designer starts working on a new feature idea or a new product idea, what will happen is you go through these stages of fidelity. So fidelity basically means how polished it is. The lowest form of fidelity, again, is the sketch. It's just like literally on paper, drawing out this is what's going to look like. Then that usually gets digitized. You collaborate on that until you, like with wireframes, you usually agree around the main screens. Like how many screens do we need? What is the structure of the screens? Where do the buttons lie, etc. Once you agree on that, then the designer takes it into the mock-up, comes out with something that already looks like the finished product. You generate feedback from your stakeholders, goes into the prototype, and that's what then your engineers start working on.